Hey, Sens fans, welcome to Season 3, Episode 17 of the Senstennial podcast. And for this week's episode, we're excited to introduce the show, NHL Draft and Prospects Analyst for Daily Faceoff, Chris Peters. So, Chris, welcome to our show.
Hey, thanks a lot. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So Chris formerly worked for ESPN, CBS, and USA Hockey. You're a pretty knowledgeable guy when it comes to prospects and college hockey in general. So we're pretty excited to pick your brain tonight. And we might as well just kick it right off with NCAA hockey. Ottawa has a handful of guys who are playing in the NCAA this year, but two more notable ones and one very notable one in Tyler Kleven and Jake Sanderson. So in so far of what you viewed of their games, what do you think about both of those guys and their futures with Ottawa?
Yeah, well, I mean, Jake Sanderson, it's hard to say enough positive things about him. I think he's got potential to be a number one defenseman for a long time. I think he's got a chance to be, a guy that could be, Brady Kechuk's going to probably wear the C for a long time in Ottawa, but I think that you'll eventually see a letter on Jake Sanderson's jersey as well. He carries himself incredibly maturely and professionally already, but his game is just so advanced. And I think this year we've seen him take it to another level where he has been able to dominate games at both ends of the ice. He's an elite skater, and he's played physically, he's played offensively. So I think he's special, in regards of what's in the Senators system right now. Tyler Kleven is a bit more of a project, but I think he's a good project to have because he's got the big size, and I think he's very underappreciated for his mobility. A very mobile player, a guy that can move that big frame very well. Everybody knows about his physicality. He is incredibly devastating body checker. But I think the thing that gets lost in that is his ability to close gaps and his ability to angle players to the boards. And once he gets a guy pinned to the boards, he's not going anywhere. So, that's a pretty impressive trait. Offensively, you're never going to be getting a lot of production out of him, but he moves the puck well enough. He's only got 8 points this season, and I expected more offense out of him, just as he gets more comfortable. He's got an incredible shot. Like, that's the thing. I wish it was better in terms of his, his ability to get it on net and his ability to get it, through. But he still has an incredibly powerful shot that, he can be a goal scoring tool for him eventually. It just kind of comes down to better anticipation and awareness and when to take those shots and making sure that you're not getting blocked or anything. But that's certainly a shot that I would be afraid to step in front of myself, but I'm not paid to play hockey. So that's, that's probably why, but I'll tell you what, I think that he's a guy that still, where Jake is ready to jump into the NHL. I think Kleven's going to need, 2 to 3 more years before he's in that discussion to be an everyday NHL defenseman. But he's at least on track. I think he's an NHL player. I think he will be down the line. You never know what you're going to get outside of the first round. But I think he was a guy that was a gamble worth taking just because he does a lot of things well.
Do you think Kleven's game has improved from the point when he was drafted? I mean, I know a lot of people were saying he was a bit of a reach at where he was taken, but do you think he's kind of tempered expectations a little bit or improved his game more to where people could see him being a second round pick?
I mean, I always thought he was a second rounder. I never thought it was that big of a reach. I had him ahead of Brock Faber, which in hindsight now doesn't look very good. Brock Faber was on the same team as him. And I didn't have a full appreciation for just how good of a skater and defender Brock Faber really was and is and was going to be. So that's a loss for me. But either way, I still think that he's an exceptional young player, and that Kleven, that is. And I would say that I wanted to see more progression year over year. There were some times this year where I think he got healthy scratched once or twice this season, which was more of like a message sending from the coaching staff. And I think that, he and Jake Sanderson are like best friends, or, very close. At least they've been roommates and things. And, they do a lot of training together. And I think that I've always said that the best thing for Tyler Kleven was having Jake Sanderson as an influence on him. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when Jake leaves as we expect after this season, and what Kleven does on his own, because he'll have to be he'll have to play a more substantial role next season. And so I think some of the stuff that's happened to him this year has been like, hey, let's get it in gear because you have a lot of potential to be a really special player. And I think there's a lot of belief in him at North Dakota that there's more there. And I believe that as well. So I would say that he has improved marginally. But I still think that there's a lot more for him to tap into.
I think that's probably a lot more thorough analysis of Kleven than we've seen in quite some time. So that's great. Thanks for providing us with that.
I try.
Bennett, did you want to go ahead?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks for joining us again, Chris. Great to have you with us. As you'll recall, last year, the Sens took a right-wing Tyler Boucher 10th overall at the draft. He started off with Boston University this season, but only managed 3 points in 17 games played before coming out of the NCAA and moving to OHL's Ottawa 67s. What did you notice about Boucher's game during his time in college hockey? And how do you think his development has gone so far?
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at Tyler Boucher and understand that, he missed so much of last season that's a significant amount of time to be on the shelf and not developing and not progressing. And at the beginning of last season, they played when he really was lighting it up and scoring and doing well. He's playing with pace and playing physically and all those things. And I think that what he found was the timing was off in college, the readiness for the physicality, even though he's a guy that dictates things physically, he didn't necessarily do that in the college game. He never really found his way. I mean, he racked up plenty of penalty minutes, which doesn't really help you a ton. There's no fighting in college hockey. So there's no, it wasn't like he was racking up majors or anything. It's just more, he was kind of making mistakes. And I think he never got comfortable. Boston University also at the beginning of the season, they were ravaged with injuries because, there are multiple players like Jay O'Brien and Luke Tuck. And so they were awful at the beginning of the season as a team. Just I watched them early in the season. I was just like, no, this is not good. This doesn't look good. And I think for Tyler, the situation with him being a number 10 pick, and you start looking at that stat line and you say 3 points in 17 games, and he's a number 10 pick. And I've maintained this from the very beginning. It's not his fault that he was picked 10th overall. Mm-hmm. I had him in the 40s because I believe that he would be a great bet in the second round. And because he missed so much time, the other thing that does give me some concern is that with as physical as he plays, he's already had injury problems. And that's another thing where can his body sustain the way that he plays? And he has to play the way that he does to make an impact. So I would say, at BU, he never really established his game. There wasn't anything that you could say that he did that was like, oh, that's what Tyler Boucher is going to be. He can be a power forward. He can be a guy that is hard on the forecheck. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 6 player. I don't think he's ever going to be a high scorer. I do think that he'll be a depth player. And again, this is the unfortunate thing for him is everybody expects the number 10 pick to be all world.
Or at least 3/4 of the world.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember, so I ranked him in the 40s, and I was like, or I think it might have even been 50th overall. I'm trying to think back to but it was between 40 and 50. And I was like, I love this player. I am a huge Tyler Boucher fan. I watched him in his U17 season, and he made an impact in those games in a way that most guys that at 16 can't do because of the physicality, because of his aggressiveness and his ability to, make plays on the wall and to win battles and his strength and all those things were so good. And then he started adding up goals in his U18 year before he got hurt. And then he goes down and he's out for the year. And it's just, you can't get anything out of him. And and so being able to see him at the World Junior Summer Showcase in the summer before the World Junior Camp, his first game, he was that guy, and then he faded down the stretch. You're like, oh, there it is. Like, is the conditioning there? So I think, but the thing is that when it's conditioning, when it's strength, when it's timing, when it's all those things, all of that can improve with time, with repetitions, with playing the game. Now he goes to the OHL. I had no problem. A guy isn't a fit wherever he is, and he tries to go somewhere else. It's been the same thing there. It's been the same so far. And again, it's going to come down to repetitions, timing, gaining strength, being able to play a lot of games. He's a long way away from, being a professional hockey player. And again, I think so often the player gets put under this pressure. And I hate when it happens that way, because it's completely outside of the player's control. But I also think that Tyler Boucher can handle it. So I hope that, especially having had the NHL bloodlines, having a dad that's involved in the game, he'll be surrounded by a good support system, and I hope that he'll be able to manage it. But the Sens didn't do him or themselves any favors by taking him that high, to be completely honest with you. So that's the way it goes.
Yeah, no kidding. Do you think that there are aspects of his game, because of that physicality and because of that presence that he can have when he's on his game, that'll translate better to the NHL level than they would in junior? Or do you think that the problems that he has are harder things to solve than, just simply the level that he's at?
Yeah, I think if you're going to be a physical player at the NHL level, for the most part, you're going to see it in junior, and you're going to see an ability to dictate. And it should theoretically, you should be stronger and better than those players in junior when you're of that caliber. And especially somebody that coming from the national team development program, you look at other guys that have come out of that program and spent the following year in the OHL or the WHL, and they're among the top players in the league. You can't say that about him now. It's only 7 games, but we're dealing with that. So if he doesn't establish those things there, it's going to be a lot harder to establish them at the next level. But yeah, it's not beyond the realm of possibility. But he is a project now that needs to be kind of rebuilt. But I think the foundation that he has, I watched those games in his U17 year when he bullied people at 16 years old. I was like, that's something. That kid's got a chance. And I would have looked at him as a first rounder had he stayed healthy and had I had, a better feel. But because he didn't, and because I had those concerns, that's why he didn't really move for me.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that is a pretty good segue going into the next question being, the top end of the 2022 NHL draft is shaping up to have a really, really solid crop of prospects. So, a lot of us saw your mid-season rankings. Who are the standouts in your top 10?
Well, yeah, there's a lot. The nice thing about the lottery of the range of this year's draft is there's a variety of positions and players that can kind of fit a bunch of different needs. And so I think that, if you're looking for top centers, you can find that, it's Shane Wright, Logan Cooley being the high end of that. But then there's, you're for a little further down, you look at like a Frank Nazar, who's a small skilled center from the National Team Development Program, or there's Connor Geeky, who is a large center in the WHL and, kind of in that lottery range, that's having a highly productive season. You got Matthew Savoy, who brings speed and skill to the table. And then, everybody saw Uri Slavkovsky at the Olympics, and being a big winger that can, play a power game and can score. Those are the types of guys there. And then on defense, you've got 2 brilliant right shot defensemen that have high upside that are, going to take some time to develop, but have been playing professional hockey from a young age. And that's David Juracek and Simon Nemec. So you've got a Czech and a Slovakian there that are 2 guys that you have to consider. What'll be interesting now is I've got 2 Russians in my top 10. How do people feel about drafting Russians now? How do they feel about their ability to get them over? It's going to be easier to take a Russian like Pavel Mintyukov, who's playing for Saginaw in the OHL, where you have a sense that maybe he'll stay in North America. But it's a little bit more difficult to make the decision of Ivan Rashnashenko and Danila Yurov, who are both in Russia right now and playing in, the KHL or the minor leagues of the KHL or the junior league, the MHL there. So those are, that's kind of a quick and dirty encapsulation of my top 10, I would say. There's a lot of, it just kind of, it's one of those situations where I think there's but there's a drop off after 2. Like I think Shane Wright and Logan Cooley are the 2 guys that are in the class of their own in terms of things. Now I had Logan Cooley number 1 at the midterm. I was the only one that did that. And it was controversial, of course, but it was at the time, what I felt. And now that since I've done that, Shane Wright has just absolutely gone off for Kingston. I'm not saying it's my fault, but he's dictated the game a lot more, and he's looked more like a number 1. He's looked more like that center that can do everything. So, but that requires you getting into the number 1 pick. And, but I think as you look in the top 10, you're going to have some variety. There's gaps between the players. I think, I really think 3 and 11, 3 and 12. I think you're getting comparable players in terms of value in that slot. But yeah, there's a lot of different players in there that fit a lot of different needs. I don't think it's an amazing draft, but I do like the lottery range of this draft. I think there's a fair amount of talent there.
So what you're saying, Chris, is sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, do the witty thing. I'll do the question.
Okay, I was going to say. So you're saying, Chris, you gave Shane the boost that he needed to get his game together and really pop off.
Yeah,
you did that.
I will take credit. I will take credit for that. Yes,
there you go.
Folks.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a possibility that players like Logan Cooley or Matthew Savoy or Frank Nazar will maybe see their draft stock drop a little because of their height? I mean, I know that's been a consistent thing in the NHL, and you like to see players like Braden Point or Alex DeBrincat to sort of buck the trend. But do you think that's still prevalent at draft tables?
It's definitely still prevalent, but it's not so much. It may be the difference between, if you're looking at Connor Geekie and Frank Nazar, you're going to look at them not for their size, but more for what they can do. I do think that NHL staffs look at that a lot more carefully. I think a Uri Slafkovsky gets a bump because he's skilled with size. He also skates well and all those things. So he does enough where it's not just a size factor. But I would say that the other thing that has to happen is that bigger guys have to bump those smaller guys off. And you look at Nazar, he's been on the rise all year. Cooley has been on the rise all year. So I think that those guys, and they're both sub 6 foot centers, which, you don't have a ton of those in the league, but if you have guys like that, there's nothing that says they can't also be good wingers or anything else. I think both Cooley and Nazar could be centers in the NHL. Cooley more so than Nazar, but which is why I have him a fair amount higher. But I would say that, this year's draft, there's just not a ton of big guys that you are going to put over those smaller skilled players, Savoy as well. And the other thing is that all 3 of them can absolutely scoot. So, they can fly up the ice, and speed matters a lot more than size at times. And shifty skill and hockey sense. And those guys have all that.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks. Bennett, did you want to throw another one his way?
No, you go ahead.
Keep him flying. Oh, okay.
No, you go ahead with the last one.
Yeah.
Well, we're not on the last one just yet there, but
I don't know. We were gonna flip the question.
Do question 6.
Yeah.
All right. We're doing great here. We're doing great. Yeah. Okay. So right now, Ottawa's sitting 7th last in the league as of today. So if they went into the draft with the 7th overall pick, who do you think might be available for them in that spot and kind of fits what the Senators need?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, they do have, like, in that range, I think you would have at least one of the two right shot defensemen there that have some size. And then you say, okay, well, we've got our blue line. It's kind of, the core is kind of there. I just think that if you have a chance to get a Nemetz or a Juracek, they're gonna surpass some of the guys in the system that are already there. You're always looking at on your board, you say, what do we have? But what do we have? Where can we get better? I think that based on the Olympics, if the Olympics didn't happen, I wonder if you would have been able to see your Slafkovsky in that range. And then that would have been like, oh, that's very nice. I mean, I do think there are still some things with Slafkovsky that gives me a little bit of pause just in terms of his overall hockey sense. And I think some of the things that he did at the Olympics was really positive. And there were other times where I was like, I'm still seeing some of the same things that had him, I had him at 10 at the midterm. And so that's something to think about. I mean, the guy that really intrigues me, if you want to continue to get more dynamic up front, is Ncaa. And he's a guy that I think will still be on the board at that point. He doesn't give you much in the size department, but you think about the success that the Senators have had with National Team Development Program players. They're forming a little bit of a Team USA there with Sanderson and Kechuk and Norris and Colin White. And, so all these guys that have been through that process, and they find the right guys. They've gotten good character guys on top of having those others. And so the thing about Ncaa that just strikes me is that he is a goal scorer. He can make so many plays from the middle of the ice. He's as sneaky a player as you'll find in this draft. He gets behind defenses and just finds soft areas of the ice, and really great anticipation on top of just tremendous speed and skill. His goal scoring traits are a little bit more advanced than that of Logan Cooley, where he's able to actually, he's got a quick release. He gets into good scoring areas pretty easily. He can get to the middle of the ice extremely well for a smaller player. So I think that that's a guy that would intrigue me. If I want to get more dynamic up front, you're going to do really well with a guy like that. There's always the possibility that guys like Savoy fall as well. I think that there's a lot of mixed opinions on Matthew Savoy in terms of, what his overall ceiling is. Is the work ethic there versus some of the other guys? I think that's something. One guy I haven't mentioned yet is Joakim Kemell as well. And he's been out for a lot of this season. That gives you some pause, but before he went down, he was scoring at a record pace in the Liga. Looked pretty good in the World Juniors, not necessarily amazing in 2 games. I mean, 2 games before it got canceled, but he didn't do anything that I mean, the same could be said for Shane Wright and others. I mean, I think Logan Cooley's like one of the few draft eligibles that was like, yeah, I helped myself there. And so I think some of the Slovakians did as well, but it's just, in that range, you're going to be happy with who's available, because I think you're going to have a lot of options. I think you're going to have a defenseman there. You're going to have one of the center, one of any of the centers. You're going to have wings. I have Brad Lambert far lower, but is he still in the mix for a position like that? Do you like that? He's obviously brings a lot of speed. You think about the like Stützle and the opportunities to have, a faster team. That he does that, but I have a lot of questions about his game. I think there's a lot of holes in his game. I still think he's an immense talent and deserving of potentially a lottery pick, but still there's I think that'd be a high risk pick at 7. But then you also look at the way that the Senators have gone so heavily on size of late, especially in the last draft, and Connor Geekie will be right there. I think he'll still be on the board. So the nice thing is that they're going to have those kinds of options. Those are the types of players that are there. Those are all among the top players in this draft. So I think if you're looking for something different, that might be it. And I wouldn't completely rule out Pavel Mintyukov as well, because he's probably the most dynamic offensive defenseman, more so than Juracek and Nemetz. And he gets, he's a goal scorer from goal scorer, playmaker. He can do a lot of different things. So, and at 7, that's still I think most would have him in top 12, top 13, top 14, somewhere in there. So it all comes down to preference, but just rattled off like 7 names right there that you could go different ways with. And it's a good position to be in. I think if you're in the lottery this year, you're feeling pretty good. Like you're going to get a player that's going to be an impact guy in your system.
I think one of the guys, like you mentioned, Connor Geekie, I think there was a lot of expectation because, he's a 6'4" center. He has seemingly offensive upside looking at his statistics. And I'm sure you've done way more research on him than we have. Genuinely, I'm like, do the Senators want Connor Geekie? Like, is he that pick that could look really good and then sort of falter? Like, do you see that at all with his game, or is he legit? Like,
yeah, I think he's legit. I think at the midterm, I bumped him down a little bit further than I had him initially, kind of when I made the list. He's closer to 11. I think the feet are a little heavier. As is the case with big guys. Bigger players do tend to take a bit longer too to develop. They have a little bit of a longer. You're like, oh, this guy's physically ready for the NHL. He might be, but he hasn't figured out how to use that physicality at the NHL level. He hasn't figured out how to protect pucks and things like that. And so, you look at him and you say, wow, he's also on one of the best teams in the CHL this year. Winnipeg has been absolutely killing people. And, I think that's a good thing, but I do think he's legit. I don't think he has the same upside as some of the more dynamic players in this draft. But I have him ahead of guys like Brad Lambert because I think he does more. I think he gives you more. He's more than just the size. He's very, very skilled for a big guy. Good soft hands, makes a good pass, really in a solid vision, nice shot. Like he makes plays and he can get to the net front. So, I think what you see is what you get from him. The way he plays now is the way that he'll have to play at the NHL level, and he's just going to have to develop physically along the way. But you look at the physical attributes, and it's hard to find that in a center. It's hard to find a center that has that much skill at that size. But you also think there have been good and bad with a player like that. I think we thought Kirby Dach really for the Blackhawks being a 6'4" center was going to be, after his rookie season, it looked like he was going to be on his way to superstardom, and he's fallen back to earth a little bit. But then you have same thing, Quentin Byfield. It's taken him longer to get to where we thought he would be. He's had to deal with some injuries and things like that. But you wonder, and you're like, wow. But you look at Geekie and you're like, gosh, the profile, and there's so many things about him that seem like Getzlaf-esque, and you're just kind of wondering. So, he's real interesting to me. And a guy that I think, judging by past preferences by the Senators, very well could be, the guy.
Yeah, like Slafkovsky, Geekie, like they really, seem to be the Sens prototypical guys. But then you look at the U.S. National Development Program, like ties with Nazar and Cooley, and then Ottawa Senators fans are kind of big braining it about, who are they going to draft? But, speaking of your midseason rankings so much, the obvious one who's probably moved up since you made those was Slafkovsky. But is there anybody else that has really jumped up or maybe even slipped even more?
Yeah, I'd say that since those came out, certainly Shane Wright's game has taken on to another level. That's for sure. I would say among the other guys on there, it's tough to say because I think it's only been about a month, and so you try to put the draft guys aside for a little bit just to let it breathe and then come back to them after a few weeks. So I haven't necessarily, I've certainly watched the top of the class a bit more. And I would say that, most improved since the rankings come out, and a guy that's moved the most is certainly Shane Wright. Like, it's to the point where I'm like, wow, that aged so badly so fast.
It's like milk.
Yeah, exactly. And I've put a lot of time and effort into, am I really going to do this? And it wasn't like, just cause I was like, I've seen both players live. I I've got copious video on him, and I just felt like Cooley was doing more and looked better. And so, yeah, but it's kind of been interesting. But yeah, so I'd say him for sure. Slafkovsky, obviously, nobody saw that coming. I mean, he scored more goals in the Olympics than he has right now for his Finnish team. So those are the big guys. The unfortunate thing is guys like Juracek, he was injured when I already put the thing out. You also have to think, what are the Russian players going to do? Those guys are probably going to drop, the ones that are based in Russia. And there aren't that many this year that are going to be high-end draft picks, but Rashenko and Yurov could be lottery picks. You just wonder. So there's a lot of things like that are kind of going on. So as I get back into it, I'll have a better idea. But I think it's going to be a big year for the national team development program at the draft. A lot of their guys are going to go in the first round. They have a really unique team, a lot of real solid players. And then beyond that, it's really it's anybody's guess at this point, kind of where things are going to go. It's still early on, and it's been a weird season to date, and it'll continue to be weird. And now we have geopolitics thrown into the mix. So
I do have to give you credit though, because even though you did have Logan Cooley ranked over Shane Wright, you at least explained it quite well. Why you did
tried.
That. It wasn't just
to.
Like it wasn't just like
wasn't just had good World Juniors. Period.
Yeah. I mean, and it was interesting. Like I waited until when I made the list. I waited until after I made the decision, and I started texting scouts. I was like, "Am I insane?" Like, no. Is that how you really feel? I was like, yeah. He's like, okay. Some were like, well, that wouldn't be my choice, but go for it. Like, and then I did have one team say that, that Wright was not their first overall on their board.
Wow.
And I mean,
Don't tell me it was Ottawa. Don't tell me Ottawa said Connor Geekie. Connor Geekie first overall.
I won't narrow it down. I won't narrow it down any further other than to say it wasn't Ottawa.
Oh, that's a positive.
We'll take that. We'll take that.
But I mean, the thing is, though, too, is there's still a lot of season left. And the thing about midterm rankings is it's a snapshot of the draft at that time. And so often we get, like, I think I wrote it in there about how I basically just, the first time I did my first draft rankings for ESPN was the Rasmus Dahlin draft. And I was like, it's Dahlin all the way. And I just stayed on it, even though I had mounting evidence that Svechnikov was a legitimate challenger. And I had Svechnikov too, and like I thought it was a lot closer than it was at the beginning of the season. But I think if I redid that again, and I looked, just looking back at the time, and this is what happens: you learn from those opportunities. I think Svechnikov proved that he was the power forward that so many teams want. But that's not to say that Dahlin's not good. He's very good too. He's just on a, he's a saber. So
you're telling me that you wouldn't pick Brady Kechuk first overall in that draft?
No,
I mean the gap is closing.
The gap is closing. But I did have Brady, fourth that year, and I mean I think he's higher now for sure.
He's definitely improved his game in every area.
Yeah, I mean, I think that pick is going to haunt Montreal Canadiens fans. That lady who reacted that way at the draft, oh my God, lady,
so good.
She has been vindicated. That woman is vindicated. It looked for a while that she was in serious trouble of being made a fool, but I think she was vindicated. And I mean, and what great fortune for the Senators to land Brady Kechuk, who is one of my all-time favorite prospects to cover, and a guy that, I kept saying, I was like, he's not just big, he's not just tough. There's a lot there. There is a lot to his game, and he's shown that as an NHL player, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
Out of curiosity, where was Kotkaniemi on your final rankings?
Ninth. He was ninth on my final rankings. Yeah. So, and I knew he was moving up, and I knew that Montreal wanted a center. And I can't even remember. I may have even mock drafted him there. No, I think I still had Brady there. Because I was like, they'll get Brady Kechuk, and no, they didn't. But Kotkaniemi that draft year, he had an incredible season. Like, unreal under 18 Worlds, under 18 Five Nations, was in the US. So every GM saw him. And he was a center in a class that was devoid of centers. And he was the best center probably, for a lot of people. But still, I mean, looking back, hindsight's easy, but Team Brady.
All right, I think we just had one more quick one, and then we'll let you plug your stuff.
Sure.
Super quickly, you mentioned it's been a weird season. There's been so much up and down, a lot of movement. Who's the prospect that's surprised you the most this year? Who's the guy that really just positively or negatively?
For the draft?
Yeah, for the 22 draft.
I'd say in terms of the guy that surprised me kind of negatively was Lambert. Like I have watching him from the time he was 15 to now, it's just like, what happened? Like he was one of the best players in Finland at 15. He is slowly, there was a chance he wasn't going to make the World Junior team. Now he did have a great 2 games at the World Juniors before it got canceled. It was against weaker opponents, but he did well. The problem is that the book on him has been out for a while, and everybody seems to have figured it out. He will stay on the perimeter. He will be speed to the outside. It's very difficult for him to get inside presence, get between the face-off dots. Is he competitive enough? Those are the types of things that I think are definitely concerning for me, because he is an elite skater. He has great skill. He has vision. He has offensive instincts. It's just, can you put it all together? And he hasn't done anything at the professional level in Finland, and it's been a huge concern. So I think the player, I still think there's a player in there, which is why I still think he's a first rounder, but I can't believe that we still have not seen progression. And now he's on his 3rd team in 3 years, so that's another thing. It's like red flag after red flag.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I think we got a lot of information, and we really appreciate you jumping on with us. So, do you want to plug anything before we sign out here?
Yeah, sure. You can catch all my work at dailyfaceoff.com. Also Hockey Sense on Substack. So hockeysense.substack.com, and Talking Hockey Sense is available wherever you get podcasts.
Awesome. Well, Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. For all of our listeners, you know where to find us. And also on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, Discord. We're on all of those. So thanks so much again, Chris. And have a good night, everybody. And go Sens, go.
Thanks, Chris.
Let's go, baby.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no problem.